The Belmont Country Club gleamed with wedding preparations, every surface polished to reflect Connecticut's social aspirations. My sister Rachel's upcoming nuptials to investment banker Bradley Morrison had consumed 6 months of planning and enough money to fund a small embassy. Absolutely no plus ones for Maya, Rachel declared, reviewing the final seating chart with Mom and the wedding coordinator. She always brings those weird government people to family events. Those weird government people were my diplomatic security detail. But explaining that to my family was like explaining nuclear physics to house cats. Maya's social circle is unconventional, Mom agreed, her voice carrying practiced disappointment. Government workers, foreign service types. Not really wedding material. Wedding material. Last month, my unconventional colleagues had extracted me from a hostage situation in Yemen where I'd been negotiating the release of 12 aid workers. The week before that, I'd mediated a territorial dispute in the South China Sea that prevented armed conflict between 3 allied nations. But apparently, none of that qualified them for Rachel's reception. Plus, Maya's job is so ambiguous, Rachel continued, adjusting place cards with military precision. When people ask what she does, I have to say something vague about international consulting. It's embarrassing. International consulting. I was Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Crisis Management, with a diplomatic passport, security clearance requiring presidential approval, and protection detail assigned by the Secretary of State herself. But my family preferred Rachel's straightforward career as a lifestyle blogger, who posted sponsored content about handbags. The Morrisons are very traditional, Dad added, appearing with his characteristic timing for uncomfortable conversations. Bradley's father sits on 3 corporate boards. They understand success that looks like success. Success that looked like success. 3 weeks ago, my success had involved preventing a trade war between the EU and Southeast Asia by restructuring agricultural agreements that would stabilize food prices for 2 billion people. But I'd done it from a conference room in Brussels instead of a country club ballroom, so it didn't count. Maya, you understand, don't you? Rachel turned to me with the patient expression she reserved for explaining obvious things. This wedding is about building our social foundation. Bradley's family has connections that could shape our entire future. Our future. Rachel's future involved posting Instagram photos and attending charity luncheons. My future involved preventing international crises that could destabilize global markets. Of course, I replied, checking my secure phone discreetly. 3 missed calls from the State Department Operations Center. I understand completely. Good. So you'll come alone, dress appropriately, and try not to mention work during dinner conversation. The Morrisons don't need to hear about whatever it is you actually do. What I actually did was represent American interests in regions where diplomats had been assassinated for far less sensitive assignments. The security detail Rachel called weird government people existed because my work had made me a target for terrorist organizations across 4 continents. But explaining that would require revealing classified information to people who thought international relations meant remembering which fork to use at embassy dinners. Speaking of appropriate dress, Mom interjected, eyeing my navy suit with obvious disapproval, perhaps we could find you something more festive? Something that doesn't look so governmental. My wardrobe consisted primarily of clothes that wouldn't attract attention in war zones, blend in at diplomatic receptions, and allow for quick movement if situations deteriorated rapidly. I'm sure I can find something suitable. Wonderful, Rachel beamed, apparently satisfied that she'd successfully managed another family crisis. This is going to be perfect. Bradley's family will be so impressed with how normal we are. While Rachel worried about impressing people with inherited wealth, I was working to prevent conflicts that could affect the inherited wealth of entire nations. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez, my lead security officer. Multiple credible threats received. State wants full protection protocol activated immediately. Wedding venue needs advanced team sweep. I excused myself to return the call. Agent Martinez, what's the situation? 3 separate intelligence sources indicate planned assassination attempt during family gathering. Details are classified, but State is implementing Level 1 protection protocols effective immediately. Level 1 protocols. That meant a minimum 8-person security detail, advanced teams, surveillance countermeasures, and coordination with local law enforcement. The wedding is tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. Secretary Chin has personally authorized full diplomatic security coverage. The venue will need to be secured, guest list vetted, and emergency evacuation plans implemented. I looked at myself in the country club's ornate mirror, imagining Rachel's reaction when federal agents arrived to transform her dream wedding into a fortress. Agent Martinez, let me handle the family briefing. Understood. But ma'am? The threats are credible. We can't compromise your safety for social considerations. Social considerations. If only my family understood that their social considerations had just collided with national security priorities. Returning to the wedding chaos, I found Rachel in crisis management mode over flower arrangements that apparently didn't match her vision for understated elegance with international sophistication. The peonies are too pink, she was explaining to a florist who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. This is supposed to evoke European garden parties. European garden parties. Rachel's closest encounter with European culture had been a guided tour of Versailles during her honeymoon planning trip. Meanwhile, I'd spent the previous month in actual European capitals, negotiating trade agreements that would affect agricultural exports for the next decade. Before I could respond to Mom's request for table-setting opinions, my secure phone rang with the distinctive tone indicating a call from the State Department Operations Center. Excuse me, I need to take this. Maya, not during wedding planning, Rachel protested. Whatever international consulting crisis you're dealing with can wait until after my big day. The irony was that my international consulting crisis was about to become her big day's primary concern. Deputy Secretary Chin, came the voice of Director Sarah Williams, head of Diplomatic Security Service. We have a situation that requires immediate action. Director Williams didn't call for routine matters. Her involvement meant this had escalated beyond normal threat assessment protocols. Go ahead, Director. Intelligence indicates coordinated attack planned for tomorrow's wedding. 3 separate terrorist cells, international connections, high probability of success without intervention. My blood ran cold. Terrorist cells? Your recent work on the Kashmir mediation disrupted funding streams for several extremist organizations. They've identified your family gathering as a soft target for retaliation. Kashmir. The territorial dispute I'd helped resolve had indeed disrupted financial networks that funded insurgent groups. But I'd assumed my classified role would protect my family from direct targeting. What's the recommended security level? Full diplomatic protection protocol. Advanced team needs immediate venue access, complete guest list background checks, perimeter security establishment, and emergency response coordination with local authorities. I looked across the ballroom at Rachel, who was currently explaining color theory to the florist with the intensity of someone whose entire worldview depended on achieving the perfect shade of blush pink. Director, you need to understand the family dynamics here. They don't know about my actual position. Deputy Secretary, with respect, family dynamics become irrelevant when we're discussing credible assassination threats. The venue must be secured within the next 6 hours. 6 hours. Rachel's rehearsal dinner was scheduled for tonight, with family and close friends gathering to celebrate her perfect wedding weekend. The same weekend that had apparently become ground zero for international terrorism. You have 1 hour to brief them before our advance team arrives. After that, operational security takes precedence over personal considerations. The call ended, leaving me staring at domestic tranquility that was about to be transformed into a federal security operation. Rachel appeared beside me, her expression shifting from wedding stress to family concern. Maya, you look pale. Is everything okay? Everything was decidedly not okay. But explaining that her wedding venue was about to be invaded by counterterrorism specialists would require revealing classified information to people who thought my biggest achievement was landing a government job with decent benefits. We need to have a family meeting. Now. Maya, we have 17 vendors arriving for final setup. Whatever work crisis you're dealing with will have to wait. Rachel, this isn't a work crisis. This is a family safety issue. Something in my voice conveyed the gravity of the situation, because Rachel's wedding coordinator mask slipped slightly. What do you mean, safety issue? Before I could answer, Dad appeared. Everything all right here? The Morrisons just arrived for the rehearsal walkthrough. The Morrisons. Bradley's parents had driven up from Manhattan, expecting a pleasant evening of wedding preparation. Instead, they were about to discover that their new in-laws came with federal security complications. "Dad, I need to speak with you, Mom and Rachel immediately." Privately. "Maya, this really isn't the time for whatever government paperwork emergency you're dealing with," Mom protested, glancing toward the arriving Morrisons with obvious anxiety. Government paperwork emergency. If only she knew that my paperwork involved preventing international incidents that could destabilize entire regions. "It's not paperwork. It's about tomorrow's wedding." I took a deep breath, knowing that the next 5 minutes would permanently alter my family's understanding of my life and career. I guided my family to a private dining room while the Morrisons toured the venue. The next conversation would require careful explanation of classified information I'd been hiding for 7 years. "This better be important," Rachel began, her anxiety escalating. "The Morrisons are expecting to meet our family in 20 minutes. Rachel, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that require security clearances. You cannot repeat this information to anyone." Dad laughed nervously. "Maya, you work in international consulting. How classified could it be?" "I don't work in international consulting. I'm Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Crisis Management, with diplomatic status that requires presidential security authorization." The silence that followed was deafening. "Deputy Assistant Secretary?" Mom's voice cracked slightly. "But you said you did consulting work." "I do consulting work. For the United States government. On preventing wars, mediating territorial disputes, and managing international crises that could affect millions of lives." Rachel had gone completely pale. "But that means you're important. Important enough that 3 separate terrorist organizations have identified tomorrow's wedding as an opportunity to assassinate me." "Assassinate?" Dad's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. "Maya, what exactly have you been doing for the government?" "Last month I mediated the Kashmir territorial dispute that prevented armed conflict between India and Pakistan. That mediation disrupted funding for several extremist groups who've now targeted me for retaliation." "Kashmir," Mom whispered. "You were in Kashmir? I thought you were at a conference in Denver." "The conference in Denver was my cover story. I was actually in a bunker outside Srinagar, convincing nuclear-armed nations not to start World War III." Rachel had progressed beyond pale to translucent. "Nuclear-armed nations? The weird government people you've been excluding from family events? They're my diplomatic security detail, assigned by the Secretary of State because my work has made me a target for assassination by international terrorist organizations." Dad was gripping a chair back with white knuckles. "Your security detail. The people we thought were just co-workers. Agent Martinez, who you met at Christmas dinner and assumed was my awkward friend from work. She's a former Navy SEAL assigned to prevent exactly the kind of situation we're facing right now." Before I could explain further, my secure phone rang. "Director Williams, right on schedule." "Director, I'm with my family now." "Deputy Secretary, our advance team is en route. ETA 15 minutes. Are they prepared for security protocols?" I looked at my family's shocked faces. "Still working on that." "Understood. But protection protocols begin immediately, regardless of family readiness." The call ended. "Who was that?" Rachel asked. "Director of Diplomatic Security Service. The federal agency responsible for protecting State Department personnel from assassination attempts. 3 separate terrorist cells have planned coordinated attacks on tomorrow's wedding. The venue will be secured by counterterrorism specialists. All guests will require background checks, and emergency response teams will be stationed throughout the property." Rachel looked like she might faint. "My wedding is going to be a counterterrorism operation?" "Your wedding is going to be safe. But yes, it will involve more federal agents than you originally planned." Before I could continue, the country club's events manager appeared in the doorway, his expression suggesting he'd never encountered this particular party planning challenge. "Ms. Chin, there are several federal agents here requesting immediate access to secure the premises. They say there's been a credible threat against one of your family members." Rachel turned to me with complete bewilderment. "Maya, who exactly are you?" "I'm your sister who prevents international wars for a living." The events manager cleared his throat nervously. "The agents are asking to speak with Deputy Assistant Secretary Chen about security protocols?" My family stared at me as the reality finally registered. That would be me, I said, straightening my governmental navy suit. The agents also wanted me to inform you that Secretary Chen will be attending tomorrow's ceremony, along with her security detail. Secretary Chen? Rachel's voice had become barely audible. The Secretary of State. My boss. She's coming to your wedding. The next 24 hours transformed Rachel's elegant garden party into the most secure social event in Connecticut history. Federal agents established perimeter security, background checks were conducted on all guests, and the Secretary of State arrived with a motorcade that attracted news crews. Rachel's wedding proceeded flawlessly, protected by security measures that ensured no terrorist organization could disrupt her perfect day. The guest list expanded to include several ambassadors and senators who'd heard about the diplomatic wedding of the year. But the real consequences came in the weeks that followed. Dad's law firm began receiving inquiries from international corporations who'd learned about his family connections to State Department leadership. Unfortunately, corporate international law required expertise his domestic practice couldn't provide, and those clients moved on to firms with actual diplomatic experience. Rachel's lifestyle blog transformed overnight when followers discovered she was the sister of a high-ranking diplomat. Sponsorship offers poured in from companies wanting government associations, but Rachel struggled to explain her sister's work beyond important international stuff. Mom's social standing evolved dramatically as friends realized they'd been dismissing someone whose daughter had security clearance above congressional levels. The calls started immediately, of course. Apologetic messages about not understanding my important work, and suggestions for family dinners where I could explain what you actually do. I listened to their voicemails while reviewing briefing materials for Middle East peace talks, then deleted them without responding. 6 months later, Foreign Policy magazine featured me as the diplomat's diplomat, how one woman prevents wars before they start. My family wasn't mentioned in the piece, though State Department sources praised the operational security that had allowed me to work effectively while maintaining personal relationships. The last I heard, Rachel had rebranded her blog to focus on international lifestyle insights, despite never traveling outside North America. Dad had partnered with an international law firm to handle inquiries his practice couldn't manage. Me. I was exactly where I'd always been, in secure conference rooms and classified briefings, preventing conflicts that would never make headlines because they never happened. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving people wrong. It's about saving the world while they're planning seeding charts.